There were still indentations on the grocery bag handles from how tight I'd gripped them. Red lines across my fingers like someone had tried to tattoo humiliation into my skin. The milk was sweating in the cold. I stood there for a beat too long, unsure if what I was looking at was real or some cruel, exhausted hallucination. But no, there they were, on the second floor, peeking through the bedroom window. The same bedroom I'd converted into a study after their mother passed. The one I hadn't set foot in for over a year because I thought giving them space meant healing. "You don't live here anymore," said Caleb, the older one, with the kind of grin you'd only expect from someone who thinks they've won. His hair was dyed again, some platinum disaster I never commented on, because that's what cool stepdads do, right? Don't overstep. Don't parent. Just fund and fade. Mom's gone. This is our house now. Behind him, his sister Ava leaned over the windowsill, laughing through a mouthful of something. Chips, probably. She didn't even blink when I stepped back onto the sidewalk. Just tossed the curtains closed like she was done watching a boring show. I didn't yell. I didn't knock. I just stood there, staring at the door. The same door I installed myself during the first winter with their mother. She wanted something blue, ocean-colored, she said, to make the entrance feel less heavy. I'd picked it, painted it, polished the brass knob every Sunday like it meant something. Now it was shut. Locked. Not jammed. Not broken. Deliberately, purposely, maliciously locked. I placed the groceries carefully on the porch, straightened the bag with the book in it, the things they carried, a reread I'd been saving, and walked back to my truck. It wasn't about theatrics. I wasn't going to give them a scene to mock. I wasn't even angry, not yet. More like stunned. Like someone had just whispered a secret in my ear I wasn't allowed to process yet. In that moment, leaning against the truck door, staring at the blue paint through the falling leaves, I thought, this can't be real. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more the silence around me felt deafening. The neighborhood kids were inside. The miller's dog wasn't barking. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath, watching what I'd do. And what I did was nothing. Because if there's one thing I've learned after marrying a widow with 2 teenagers and walking the razor-thin line between dad and intruder for a decade, it's this. Your reaction is their ammunition. So I left, quietly, drove 10 miles out to an old motel I used during roof renovations 5 years ago. Still had the key tag in my glove box. I booked a room under a fake name. I don't know why. Maybe I was ashamed, and sat on the edge of the bed watching the floral curtains flap in the breeze from the broken AC. It hit me then. They didn't see me as anything. Not even an obstacle. Just a placeholder, now removed. And all I could do was sit with that feeling, letting it sink in like water through rotten floorboards. For every man who raised kids he didn't make, who paid the tuition, fixed the leaky sinks, showed up to parent-teacher conferences, and was still treated like luggage at the baggage claim. If you're listening, this one's for you. Hit that subscribe button, because we're not done yet. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the one contact I hadn't touched in over a year. Her father, the old man, my wife's dad. When she died, he and I drifted. He blamed me, not directly, but in that quiet, you should have noticed the symptoms earlier kind of way. Still, I hit call. He answered on the 3rd ring. Cheerful. Always was a morning person. "Well, I'll be damned. You finally remembered I exist." "They changed the locks," I said flatly. A beat. "Who did?" "Your grandkids." Silence. Then, "You mean, they locked you out of the house?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Told me I don't live there anymore." Ava laughed. Another pause. This one longer. I heard the soft creak of his old leather chair on the other end. A low sigh. Then his voice dropped, not in volume, but in weight. "They looked like..." But he didn't finish the sentence. Just hung in the silence like a man trying to decide whether to speak a memory or bury it. I sat in the motel room like a ghost who hadn't realized he'd died yet. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, floral and beige and quietly rotting. There was a stain on the carpet near the mini fridge that looked like a wine glass had been dropped, but hadn't been cleaned properly. Everything smelled like it had once been clean, but gave up trying. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll my phone. I just stared at the ceiling fan as it wobbled slightly with each rotation. They didn't just kick me out. That wasn't what was bothering me. It was the look on their faces. That glint. That self-satisfied malice. Not just, "You're not needed," but, "You never mattered." It would have hurt less if they'd been yelling, or crying, or even confused. But they weren't. They were sure of themselves. Certain. Like someone had told them they were finally free of the thing they'd been forced to tolerate. The nuisance who paid the bills and never made a fuss. And then there was the old man's voice. "They looked like," he'd started to say, and just stopped. I knew what he meant. I felt it before he even spoke it. It wasn't about their mother. Not directly. It was about something uglier. Something we'd never spoken aloud, even when she was alive. There were things I chose not to see over the years. Little things. Their casual entitlement. The way they bristled every time I gave advice, no matter how gentle. The fact that I'd been listed on 0 emergency contact forms at school, even though I was the one picking them up. They'd always seen me as a wallet with a pulse. A means to an end. But I told myself they were just kids. Grieving. Struggling. I gave them time. I gave them patience. I gave them love. And eventually, I gave them power. That was my mistake. Not legal power. God, no, I was never that naive. But the power of assumption. I let them live in that house as if it was theirs. I paid off the mortgage and made sure the trust was invisible to them. I wanted them to feel secure. I didn't want them to live like tenants. I let them feel like heirs. I wanted it to be their home. Not just walls and plumbing and title documents, but a place that made them feel chosen. What I didn't expect was for them to see that as weakness. That night, I didn't sleep. Not in the tortured, pillow-clutching kind of way you see in movies. I just didn't move. I stayed fully clothed, sitting in the chair by the window, watching headlights flicker past. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the envelope I kept there for emergencies. Inside was a key, not to the house, to the storage unit, the one I hadn't touched since the funeral. I told myself I'd go through it someday, figure out what to keep, what to donate. But really, I just didn't want to face it. That storage unit wasn't just full of her clothes and memories. It was full of all the things I'd planned, the files I'd created, the protection I'd quietly arranged in case this day ever came. Back then, I didn't believe it would. Now I was starting to wonder why I'd been so sure. I called the unit's 24-hour office. Told them I'd be arriving before dawn. The guy sounded half asleep, but said he'd leave the gate open. No one asked questions when I pulled up in the truck and backed it into the bay. I unlocked the unit. Pulled up the door. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly blue hue. There, in the far back corner, was the steel file cabinet. The only thing I'd labeled with her name and mine. Every folder inside had been created in the first year of our marriage. Deed transfers, insurance statements, a copy of the original trust, a list of contacts. Back then, I thought I was being thorough. Now, I realized I'd been preparing for war without knowing who the enemy would be. As I flipped through the folders, I saw a familiar name. The attorney who'd helped us set up the trust after she passed. A quiet guy, like Jazz. Never smiled unless he meant it. He once told me, if you protect people too much, they forget they can be hurt. I didn't understand that at the time. Now I couldn't stop hearing it. I closed the file cabinet, locked it, carried the folder back to the truck. The sun was starting to rise, thin light stretching across the lot like it was warning me what kind of day was coming. I sat behind the wheel and stared at the house address typed on the cover page. The same house they thought they'd inherited just by existing. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to remember who I was before I tried to be everything to everyone else. I started the engine and drove to a quiet law office on 8th Street. The storage unit was colder than I remembered, not in temperature, though the concrete floor didn't help, but in atmosphere. It felt like I'd stepped into a mausoleum of my own past, sealed and left to collect silence. Rows of plastic tubs, an old cedar chest, her favorite reading chair wrapped in dusty blankets. All the artifacts of a life I tried to preserve, not because I couldn't let go, but because I thought someday, maybe Ava would want her mom's recipes. Maybe Caleb would want to see her notes in the margins of her gardening books. But they never asked. They never even came here. I walked to the back, past the Christmas decorations, past the folded-up camping gear we only used once. And there it was, the gunmetal gray safe bolted to the floor. Heavy, square, simple. The key turned with a groan. It had been years. Inside, neatly stacked, the original property deed, the home insurance documents, 2 notarized copies of the family trust, and a manila envelope marked with my wife's handwriting, just my name on it. Nothing else. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't here for nostalgia. The deed was the first thing I pulled. It still had the courthouse stamp from 8 years ago, when we'd refinanced under my name, but chose to shift the title into a family trust. A decision we made late one night, after her second round of chemo. She'd said she wanted to make sure the kids were taken care of if anything happened. I remember asking her, and me? She'd looked at me, tired but smiling. You're the one who takes care of everyone else. You'll be fine. So we met with her father's attorney. A gray-haired man with sharp glasses and a voice like velvet rope. He'd drawn up the papers. I'd signed. She'd signed. and we'd placed the property into the FNJ Living Trust, her parents' initials, but I was listed as the sole trustee after her death. Silent control, that's what they called it. A safety net the kids would never see, unless they looked closely. Which, of course, they never did. They didn't know the house was in the trust. They didn't know their names weren't anywhere near the documents. All they saw were years of comfort, and assumed that comfort was theirs by birthright. Not earned, not maintained, just automatic. I sat on a folding chair across from the safe and stared at those documents. Not out of sentiment, but out of restraint. I had every tool to take everything back, legally and swiftly. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about intention. They hadn't just locked me out of the house. They'd spat on what their mother and I tried to build. And the deeper truth, the one I wasn't sure I could say aloud yet, was that I'd let them believe I was powerless on purpose. That I'd allowed their arrogance to grow unchecked. That I thought love would correct what discipline never touched. And that was on me. When she died, I didn't just lose a partner. I lost the buffer. The bridge. The voice that could say to them, he's not trying to replace your dad. He's trying to be the man who stays. After she was gone, they reverted. Quick, cold, calculated. And I just let it happen. Because part of me thought that if I gave them everything, they'd eventually give back something real. A thank you. A small gesture. Even a we see you. But they didn't. And when they saw the opportunity, when the grief dried up and the entitlement calcified, they locked the door. Smiled. Laughed. That laugh, from the window, it still echoed. I picked up the envelope with my name on it. Considered opening it right then. But something stopped me. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear her voice again. Maybe I wanted to earn it. Or maybe I needed to know, without any final letters or poetic closure, that I could act for myself now. I closed the safe. Locked it. Carried only the trust documents back to the truck. I slid them behind the seat and drove. Past town, past the high school where I'd once watched Caleb play soccer in the rain, past the old coffee shop she loved with the terrible scones. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was something else. Still. Sharp. Steady. And by the time I pulled into the attorney's lot on 8th Street, I wasn't asking if I should act. I was deciding how. They didn't even hear the door at first. The chime was soft, and the music from the Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen was just loud enough to muffle it. Ava was slicing limes for a pitcher of something citrus and sugary. Caleb was digging around in the pantry, looking for the bag of sea salt chips they always bought, but rarely ate. They were celebrating, if you could call it that, airing out their house. Opening windows, blasting playlists with titles like Main Character Energy. Ava had even lit one of her mother's old candles and said she'd want us to feel at home. It was the third knock that made them look at each other. Caleb peeked through the side window. It's Grandpa. Ava blinked. Seriously? What's he doing here? They opened the door together. He stood there in his brown wool coat, too heavy for the mild evening, hands trembling, not from cold, but from something knotted deeper. Did something happen? Ava asked, voice lilting, sweet. She always turned on the charm around him, especially when she needed something. She stepped aside. Come in, Grandpa. Want tea? He didn't smile, didn't nod, just stepped in with that slow, deliberate motion he used when something felt off. They led him to the living room. He didn't sit. He stood in the center, glancing around like a man seeing a crime scene where no blood had been spilled, just quiet, casual desecration. Ava placed the tea in front of him anyway. Lemon ginger. The mug with world's best granddad on it, the one they only ever pulled out for show. He didn't touch it. Why? He asked finally, voice quiet but cutting. Why what? Caleb asked, sitting on the arm of the couch like he was at a dorm debate. Why did you lock him out? The question dropped like a cinder block into a pond. No ripples. Just a deep, heavy silence. Ava tilted her head, almost amused. We didn't lock him out. He's just not part of this anymore. Mom's gone. You told us it would be ours. There it was. The first fracture. He looked at her. Not toward her. At her. As if seeing something he didn't recognize. I told you, he said slowly, that you would inherit this. That one day, when the time was right, when you'd grown, when you'd learned what this house meant, you'd receive it. Ava shrugged. Well, we're grown. And locking out the man who kept your mother alive through 6 surgeries, that's your version of grown? Caleb rolled his eyes. He was a babysitter with a checkbook? Don't act like he's some war hero. He didn't even. Enough. The words shattered the air. Ava's glass clinked as her hand jerked slightly. I told you it would be yours, their grandfather said, his voice fraying, with grace. Not entitlement. Not cruelty. Not like this. He started to shake. Literally. His hands, his chin. And they weren't the tremors of old age. They were tremors of someone standing on ground he thought was solid, suddenly realizing it was swamp. He called me. He said, "Eyes wet now?" He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just told me what you did. And for a moment, I didn't believe him. I thought, maybe he misunderstood. Maybe there was some mix-up. But then I saw your faces just now. And I knew. He sat. For the first time. But it wasn't restful. It was like his legs gave out, and the chair caught him as a formality. Ava moved to speak, but he raised his hand. Not a command, just a broken gesture. His gaze was far away now, like he was drifting through old memories he didn't want to revisit. "She made me promise," he whispered. "When she was sick, she said, 'Don't let them grow up entitled.' And I said I wouldn't. I swore it. And then I saw you today, treating the man who stayed, when even I couldn't stand to look at her some days, with less kindness than you'd give a stranger." A single sob escaped. Small, uncontrolled. Ava backed up instinctively, unsure of what to do. "I didn't give you this house," he said, voice thin as wire. "You were supposed to earn it. You were supposed to see what it cost." Caleb finally snapped. "It cost him? Are you serious? He got 10 years of free living, no real kids of his own, and all he had to do was pretend to care." Ava flinched. The old man stared at him for a long, long moment. Then something inside him seemed to stop. Not break. Stop. As if a clock had just run out of ticks. He stood again. Slowly. Quietly. "I'll be back," he said. No anger. No volume. Just that. Caleb scoffed. "With what? Lawyers?" The old man didn't answer. He walked to the door, one hand brushing the hallway photos as he passed. One of them was crooked. Her smile beamed from behind the glass, mid-laugh, the way she always looked when she was mocking the photographer. He fixed the frame gently, turned the photo to face the hallway wall. Then he walked out, and the silence he left behind was deeper than anything they'd ever felt. The building on 8th Street looked like the kind of place people passed without noticing. No bold signage, no manicured landscaping. Just a rust-colored brick facade with ivy crawling up one side, and a frosted glass door that read Wells and Mahoney, LLP, Estate, Trust, and Legacy Planning. I'd been here before. Once. 8 years ago, when her hair had started falling out in clumps, and we sat in this very office preparing for a future none of us wanted to name out loud. The receptionist didn't recognize me. A young guy with a tight haircut and a half-buttoned shirt. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm here to see Charles Wells," I said. "He'll remember me." He didn't question it. Something in my tone must have struck the right chord, and disappeared down the hall. A minute later, the door opened, and out came Charles. Older now, but still sharp-eyed, still dressed like every button had been fastened with purpose. He looked at me for a second, then extended his hand. "Well," he said, "you've either come to finally close the trust, or you've come because someone made a very big mistake." I followed him into his office, past the same oak shelves stacked with leather-bound folders and certificates no client ever asked to read. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in soft gray light. The air smelled faintly of cedar and stale coffee. "They locked me out," I said, before he could sit. He paused. "Caleb and Ava?" I nodded. He didn't ask for the details. He didn't need to. He pulled a folder from his cabinet. Dark green. My name embossed in gold. "The original trust gave you near total discretionary control. Your late wife and her father were both very deliberate in that. You've been managing it passively, yes?" "I never touched a thing," I said. "Let them live freely. Pay the utilities. No restrictions. I never even asked them to acknowledge it." Charles opened the folder, flipping through the paperwork. "There's a clause," he said slowly. "Page 19. You remember?" "I remember drafting it," I said. "Never thought I'd need it." He slid the paper toward me. The clause was simple. Should any residing beneficiary or party engage in gross personal misconduct toward the trust's acting manager, defined as malicious action, verbal or physical harm, or acts intended to harm or defame, their right to occupancy is immediately revocable, pending formal notice by the trustee. He handed me a pen. "You're within your rights to enforce it. Clean. Quiet. No court. You just need to sign, date, and provide reasonable evidence of the misconduct. From there, we handle notice. Utilities can be frozen. Access revoked. They'll have 14 days. No extensions." I stared at the page. "You don't have to do this out of anger," Charles said softly. "But if you don't do this, then the entire trust structure becomes meaningless. They think the house is theirs. But the only reason it ever felt like it was, is you." He was right. The legal structure had always been clear. What had blurred the lines was my silence, my refusal to enforce, my belief that kindness could outlast entitlement. I signed. No hesitation, no emotion. He slipped the page into a new file, locking it in his drawer. We'll draft the eviction notices, utility suspensions, and behavioral summary. Do you have evidence? I pulled out my phone. I had photos of the locked door, a timestamp call logged to their grandfather. I had a video, a short one, recorded from the street, showing Caleb pointing and laughing through the window as I walked away. No malice in his eyes, just triumph. That alone was enough. Charles watched the clip and nodded. That'll do. I stood to leave. He looked at me, then added quietly, do you want to be notified when the letters go out? No. I'll know when it starts. He didn't offer a handshake this time. Just a nod, professional and distant. I stepped into the hallway and out into the sunlight, which felt too bright for how I felt inside. Not better. Not worse. Just empty of the ache. The decision was made. Not from rage. Not from revenge. From something colder. Precision. Let them call it betrayal. Let them panic. Because the truth was, I'd been walking around this whole time with a loaded mechanism in my back pocket. Not out of paranoia, but protection. They thought the trust was invisible. They thought kindness meant impotence. They never read what they signed, and I never reminded them. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Thick paper. No logo. No return address. Just their names typed in a serif font that looked like it belonged in an old courtroom transcript. Ava grabbed it from the mailbox on her way back from her Pilates class, thumbed the corner with disinterest, and tossed it on the kitchen counter next to a pile of takeout menus and unopened grocery coupons. She didn't even glance at the name in the corner. Trust Manager, F&J Living Trust. Caleb walked past it twice. Once when he came down to microwave leftover pizza. Once when he was pacing during a phone call about reselling his sneakers. He noticed it. He just didn't care. Another piece of mail. Probably boring. Probably nothing. By noon, the kitchen lights flickered. Ava blinked. Did you see that? Caleb shrugged, too busy trying to connect his PlayStation. The router lights were blinking erratically. Then the power cut out completely. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was sudden. Artificial. Even the refrigerator stopped humming, as if holding its breath. Maybe a breaker? Caleb said, heading to the basement. But everything there looked fine. Switches up. No smells. No blown fuses. Then Ava turned the faucet. Nothing. No pressure. Not even a gurgle. She looked at him, suddenly less amused. Okay, that's weird. It was only when she glanced back at the kitchen counter and saw the envelope still lying there, pristine and untouched, that something in her gut turned. She picked it up, peeled it open, and began to read. Her fingers started to tremble by the second paragraph. Caleb watched her lips move silently, her brows tightening with every line. What? He asked. She didn't answer right away, just handed him the letter, eyes wide, her voice barely above a whisper. It's an eviction. Caleb squinted. Notice of tenancy revocation, he read aloud. Per Clause 19A of the F&J Living Trust, all tenant rights are hereby rescinded due to verified breach of fiduciary conduct against the trust manager. He scoffed. What does that even mean? Ava grabbed the letter back, rereading. Utilities will be suspended as part of the revocation process. You have 14 calendar days to vacate the premises. Any attempts to resist enforcement will result in legal escalation at the discretion of the trustee. She looked up. Is this real? Caleb snatched his phone, tried to call the electric company. Got an automated message. Service has been disconnected at this address per trust authorization. The same message from the water provider. The internet service. Every single system was going dark, like falling dominoes. Okay, this is not funny, Ava said, pacing now. This has to be illegal. But her voice didn't carry the usual edge. It was thinner now. Hello. Call Grandpa, Caleb said. He'll explain this. This has to be a mix-up. She did. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. Leave a message, the recording said. She didn't. They tried his landline. Then his cell. Nothing. That was when the arrogance started to bleed away. Who was the trust manager? Caleb asked suddenly. Ava's mouth opened, then closed. Neither of them knew. Because they'd never asked. Never read. Never even considered the house wasn't already theirs. They assumed trust meant it was being held for them. They never imagined it was being held from them. They pulled open drawers, searching for old paperwork. Nothing. Their mother's files were long gone. Anything that might have explained the trust structure had either been thrown out or buried under years of neglect. Ava opened a filing app on her phone and scrolled through emails from 6 years ago. Nothing relevant. Just photos. Birthday invitations. A scanned copy of the will, not the trust. That night, they sat in the living room with flashlights, wrapped in hoodies. The fridge was thawing. The house felt unfamiliar, vulnerable. Even the shadows felt different, longer, more judgmental. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind like someone testing a lock. And still, no word from their grandfather. No call. No message. No clue. It wasn't just the utilities being shut off. It was the ground beneath their feet, vanishing, quietly, with precision, like someone had been waiting for them to laugh just a little too loud, so he could remind them who the architect really was. The SUV was silent when it pulled in, too smooth, too deliberate. It glided into the driveway like it belonged there, its matte black finish swallowing the afternoon light. Caleb spotted it first, through the upstairs hallway window. He narrowed his eyes, still groggy from a sleepless night of arguing with the internet provider, the power company, the water department, anyone who'd listen. No one had. Every call ended the same way. Per the trust agreement, we cannot speak to unauthorized residents. Unauthorized. That word had taken root in Ava's mind like a weed, growing between the cracks of her certainty. The man who stepped out of the SUV looked like someone pulled from a courtroom drama. Charcoal suit, silver tie, no briefcase, just two thick envelopes in his gloved hand. He didn't check the address, didn't knock. He rang the bell once, stepped back precisely 3 paces, and waited. Caleb opened the door, shoulders squared. "Can I help you?" The man didn't answer, just held out one of the envelopes, addressed to Mr. Caleb Rowan, occupant. Ava appeared behind him, arms crossed tight. "What is this?" Another utility shutoff. The man extended the second envelope to her. "Ms. Ava Rowan, occupant." His eyes were calm. Not cold. Not warm. Just unreadable. Caleb didn't take his. "Look, whatever this is, you can tell your client." "I'm not at liberty to discuss the trust's strategic decisions," the man interrupted. "But as of this moment, you are both under formal notice. The documents inside outline your status." He turned to go. "Wait," Ava snapped. "Status as what?" He paused. "As unlawful occupants." Effective immediately, Caleb grabbed the envelope and ripped it open. Inside, a 14-day eviction notice. An inventory checklist detailing every room, every item logged. A schedule of when movers would arrive if they failed to vacate. And at the back, 6 pages of behavior logs. Security camera footage timestamps. Screenshots of texts between them. Quotes. Mockery. The window video. Their laughter. Even the remark about their stepfather being just a wallet. Ava's knees gave slightly. "This is insane. He's spying on us." The man turned back to them. "No. He protected himself. You just didn't notice." Caleb's face flushed. "This is illegal." "Incorrect," the man replied, stepping back toward the SUV. "This is enforcement." Ava raised her voice, almost desperate now. "He can't do this." The man turned back, just once, and looked her dead in the eyes. "He already did. You just didn't know who he really was." He got into the SUV, door closing with a soft click. No roar of the engine. Just motion. Quiet and definite. As the vehicle rolled back down the driveway, Ava's breath hitched. She looked around. At the porch, the windows, the fence Caleb never finished fixing, the cracks in the concrete she'd always meant to address. It no longer felt like theirs. Not even close. Inside, Caleb flipped through the documents again, hands shaking now. "He was recording us." "No," Ava muttered, eyes distant. "He was watching and waiting." It hadn't been surveillance. It had been preparation. Years of patience, of tolerance mistaken for fragility. And now the whole framework was tightening around them like a net they never even realized they were swimming in. They had laughed at him, mocked him, erased him. And now, he didn't even have to show up in person. Because the house wasn't in their name. Because they weren't even listed in the trust. Because he was never the one on the outside. They were. And the door they slammed shut had never been theirs to lock. The diner was one of those old highway joints that time forgot. Tin roof, faded red stools, a jukebox that hadn't worked since Clinton's first term. Ava had never actually been inside. Caleb had driven past it 100 times on his way to the lake, always assuming it was a place where truckers drank black coffee and old people stared at maps they'd stopped following. But today, it felt like the only place left to go. After 2 days of trying to reach their grandfather, calls, texts, even a desperate email from Ava titled Urgent Family Matter, they finally heard from him. Not a reply, not a call back. Just a forwarded diner address with a time, 3:15 p.m. Don't be late. They arrived at 3:12. The waitress pointed silently to the back booth. And there he was. He looked smaller, not just physically. His shoulders seemed lower. The outline of his body softer, like grief and exhaustion had started eroding the harder edges of him. He didn't look up when they approached, just stirred his coffee slowly, the ceramic spoon tapping gently against the mug. Ava slid into the booth first. "Grandpa." He raised a hand. She stopped. Caleb sat across from him, folding his arms. The silence was thick, the kind that presses against your ribs and makes every breath feel like a decision. Finally, he spoke. "I built that house with my son-in-law," he said. No greeting, no questions, just the flat truth. He handled the contractors. I handled the banks. We made every decision together, from the doorknobs to the insulation. It was never just your mother's house. It was their home, built from scratch. He glanced at them now. His eyes weren't angry. They were wounded, tired in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. I thought, when she passed, that the pain would bind us, that you'd see how he stayed, how he never walked away. I thought, maybe you'd understand the kind of man that takes on someone else's heartbreak and calls it family. Caleb leaned forward, trying to retake ground. We did understand. But he was never really our. He was the one at her bedside every night, the old man cut in, while I was too scared to look. He was the one washing her hair when the nurses were too rough. He was the one making sure the mortgage got paid and the doctors got their checks. Ava's voice broke. "Then why didn't you tell us? Why make it all hidden? Why keep the trust a secret?" "Because it wasn't about control," he said softly. "It was about protection. For him. For you. For all of us." Caleb's fists tightened. "He humiliated us. Sent strangers to our door like we were criminals." "You humiliated yourselves," the old man said, not unkindly. "He didn't force you to laugh. He didn't make you mock him. That was you. Every word. Every text. Every sneer. He didn't want to use the trust. You left him no choice." He sipped his coffee, and then said the line that finally broke them. "You made him choose between dignity and forgiveness." Ava swallowed hard, her fingers trembling slightly on the tabletop. "We were angry. Confused. We thought we were protecting Mom's memory. By erasing the man who kept it alive for a decade?" he asked, voice low. There was nothing to say. Not really. They hadn't come for reconciliation. They'd come hoping for leverage. Some emotional key that would unlock the house again, undo the damage. But what they found instead was a man who'd already mourned the loss, not of them, but of what they could have been. And then, after a long silence, he added, almost to himself, almost like a final nail in the coffin. "And you laughed." Neither of them spoke again. The waitress refilled his coffee. Ava's eyes blurred, and she quickly blinked it away. Caleb stared down at his hands like he didn't recognize them. They thought they were winning. But the truth was, the moment they chose mockery over memory, control over compassion, they'd lost something they couldn't name. And now, the man who had once been their last resort was simply done. The house looked unfamiliar even from the outside. Something about the symmetry of it was wrong. Not broken, not vandalized, just sterile, detached, like it had already decided to forget them. The porch light was gone, literally unscrewed from the fixture, the wires capped off neatly. No welcome glow, no soft yellow hue against the siding that once signaled your home. Just a vacant bracket above the door and the faint discoloration where the light used to hang. Even the doormat was missing. Not replaced, just gone. Caleb stepped out of the rideshare first, eyes narrowing at the two moving trucks backed into the driveway. Uniformed workers carried boxes out the front door in a steady stream, each one labeled with a black marker in unmistakable handwriting. Ava, bedroom closet. Caleb, media shelf. Garage, miscellaneous. What the hell is this? Caleb muttered, storming toward the porch. Ava followed, slower. Her stomach was already sinking before her foot hit the first step. Something about the silence, the efficiency of it, told her this wasn't a warning shot. This was final. One of the movers nodded as they approached, barely looking up from his clipboard. "Eviction's in process. You'll want to avoid getting in the way, ma'am." "I live here," Caleb snapped. The man didn't flinch, just flipped the clipboard around. "Not according to the trustee. You've got until noon tomorrow to remove personal items. Everything else is cataloged and assigned for storage under your names. If you don't claim it, it's considered abandoned." Ava stared at the boxes, the labels, the vanishing pieces of her life being packed and moved with such sterile precision. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy. It was planned. She stepped inside. It hit her like a punch. The living room was stripped. The bookshelves emptied. The throw blankets folded and stacked neatly by the door. the rug rolled and secured with plastic wrap. Even the plants were gone. Upstairs, her room had been reduced to boxes and a single garment bag hanging in the closet, the same one she'd worn to her mother's memorial. Untouched since. In the kitchen, the coffee mugs were stacked in cardboard trays. Her phone charger coiled inside a labeled zip bag. The framed poster from her dorm years now wrapped in brown paper with a post-it that read fragile, sentimental in someone else's handwriting. The house was being erased, but carefully, intentionally, like someone wanted them to see every inch of what was being undone. A voice from outside drifted through the open door. One of the neighbors, Mr. Bellman, the retired guy who always watered his lawn in cargo shorts, even in November. "Guess the real owner's coming home," he muttered to his wife as they walked their dog. "About time." Caleb heard it too. His jaw tensed. Ava walked to the mantel, the one thing that hadn't been cleared yet. There, standing alone against the empty wall, was a single framed photo. Their mother, laughing, hair up, no makeup, caught mid-laugh at a picnic table, holding a glass of lemonade while someone out of frame reached to tuck her hair behind her ear. He wasn't in the frame, but they knew it was him. She turned the photo over. Taped to the back was a note. Handwritten. Neat. Minimal. "You mistook silence for weakness." Caleb stood behind her now. He read it over her shoulder and didn't say a word. Because what was left to say? They hadn't just lost a house. They hadn't just lost a fight. They'd lost standing. There was no appeal to file. No argument to make. No adult to call and demand a reset. They'd bet everything on the assumption that kindness equaled impotence. That patience meant passivity. And they'd forgotten, ignored, really, that the man they'd spent 10 years disregarding was also the one who'd never left. Who paid the bills? Who fixed the leaks? Who kept the lights on? Until he didn't. Now the lights were off. And every corner of the house they once called their own was a mirror reflecting a single truth. They hadn't built anything. They'd inherited something. And they treated it like a free trial. Outside, another box was wheeled to the truck, labeled Kitchen Avis. The driver sealed the tailgate. Inside, Caleb sat on the bottom stair, his hands on his knees. No phone, no yelling, just that hollow, echoing quiet that comes after a storm, when you finally realize the damage wasn't loud. It was deliberate and irreversible. The front door no longer made a sound when it opened. No welcome creak, no soft clatter of keys, just the hush of air brushing past, as if even the house had grown used to silence. He stepped inside and paused in the entryway. The scent of lemon oil and cardboard still lingered faintly from the movers. But the rooms were empty now, echoing with the absence of voices that had once filled them with noise, laughter, arguments, music, stomping footsteps on the stairs, doors slamming without apology. Now just the birds outside, and the distant click of branches tapping against a window. He walked slowly, taking in the hollow outlines where furniture had stood, the faint shadows on the walls where photos used to hang. The spot in the hallway where Ava had once painted a crooked vine in green marker when she was 9. He'd covered it up. Twice. She'd redrawn it each time. Eventually, he'd left it. Gone now. In the kitchen, he opened a drawer. Empty. He opened the fridge. Clean. Someone had wiped everything down, even scrubbed the tiny rust spot under the produce drawer. For a moment, he imagined what the kids must have felt in those final hours, packing boxes not knowing which memories they were allowed to claim and which ones would never belong to them. He didn't linger there. The house didn't pull him anymore. It didn't whisper memories or send ghosts down the hallway to stop him in his tracks. It let him move freely now, detached, almost polite. He climbed the stairs, pausing on the landing. The attic door hung open slightly, the same way it had after she passed, when he stored away all her hospital paperwork, her scarves, the letters she never sent. He didn't go up there. He turned left, down the hall, and stopped at the last door. The study. The door was ajar, the light from the bay window falling across the hardwood floor in soft bands. And there, in the corner, sat the old man, his back to the door, the same wool cardigan draped over his shoulders, a mug of cold tea on the side table, a small notepad in his lap with no pen. Just an old man sitting in a quiet house, staring at a world that no longer answered to him. The stepfather stepped in and said nothing. Not at first. The old man didn't turn around. "They looked like," he said again, voice rasped from hours of unspeaking. This time he finished. Her, when she was angry. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't wistful. Just a quiet acknowledgement of something neither of them had ever dared put into words. That her fire, so beautiful, so blinding, had also burned. That parts of it had passed down, unfiltered, to the very ones they tried to protect from it. The stepfather nodded. I loved her through that too, he said gently. And he meant it. Not as an excuse. Not as a defense. As a memory. He crossed the room, placing a steady hand on the old man's shoulder. Felt the tremor beneath the wool. Not fear. Not regret. Just age. The kind that settles into the bones after watching too much be lost, too much misunderstood. Neither man cried. Neither apologized. Because none of it had been about revenge. Not really. It had been about the line that separates love from indulgence, grace from permission, and how sometimes holding on too long is just another way of letting go. He glanced once around the study, the shelves still full of the books no one ever opened, the chair she used to curl up in during thunderstorms, the desk drawer that still held her favorite pen. He could stay, or he could leave. It didn't matter anymore. The house was his again, but it would never be a home. Not in the way it had been when her laugh echoed off the kitchen tiles. When the kids were still learning how to grieve and not yet how to hate. When silence had meant peace, not retreat. He gave the old man's shoulder a gentle squeeze. Stay as long as you like, he said quietly. And then he walked out, the floor creaking underfoot, not with protest, but with recognition. The kind of sound a place makes when it finally remembers who it belongs to.